So,
Perfect.
well, Tony, it's great to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out for the show today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Joe, thank you for having me today.
Yes, sir. So before we get into your work, before we get into your world, I always begin with this question. 6 years ago, this pandemic changed so much about the way we work and live. How did you get through that era, and how did it change the way that you approach life and work?
Yeah, it's particularly I guess fitting for our story, with my company because during COVID, I was actually still working for a company called Mark Anthony Brands, Mark Anthony Brewing. I was the vice president of brewing and quality for them. They were they're the group that we developed White Claw. And um, so during this time, the world was shut down, but White Claw was blowing up. And because it was blowing up, we decided that we would build three breweries like overnight. And so, in some ways, it worked to our advantage because we were able to, all the contractors we wanted. We were considered the beer industry was considered an essential industry, so we were allowed to work and we were allowed to gather with precautions and so forth as long as we kept pumping out the beer. So um, anyways, we were able to get contractors and everything. We built these three breweries. Two of them are over 1 million square feet, and one of them was about 500,000. The small one was 500,000 square feet. And I guess what I got out of that were a couple things. One is I thought it was in some ways it was really tough going through it, but it was also brilliant on the part of our owner Anthony von Mondel, um, who was pushing for it because we were oversold. Every single case that we produced was pre-sold, and so we couldn't keep up given the network that we currently had. So we had to do something in order to get more volume out. And had we not built those breweries, we would not have been able to sell the amount of White Claw that we had in that time frame. So I think you know, there's something about, you know, striking the iron when it's hot, right? And so that was a definite learning. The other thing for me is it led into kind of me going into this new business. Um, my son was having his and his wife were having their first child. This was in 2020, and it's we're in the middle of a lockdown still, and all this other stuff. And he's in the hospital, and she's in labor at 2 in the morning, and so he goes downstairs to grab some caffeine. He's not a coffee drinker, and he finds himself reaching for a cotton candy flavored energy drink. And he's like 32, 33 years old at this point, and he's saying to himself, oh my god, who am I? I'm about to become a dad and I'm still drinking these candy flavored, you know psychedelic labeling, over the top macho adrenaline stuff. And so, anyways, we started talking about it. He ends up not drinking it, but he tells me this story. I said, well, we could make an energy drink for adults. We'll leave everything else. Everyone else can go after the kids. We'll just go after the adults. And because it was COVID, we decided to push for an immunity based support system in our energy drink. So it's an all natural energy drink that supports immunity through these botanicals and so forth. And I think so. It took us a couple of years to get the name right, and but the formulation was sort of kind of was done almost immediately because of my background as a formulator and because of my Eastern heritage. I'm from the Philippines. My mother taught me some stuff when I was young. And so we used a lot of the botanicals that she used to give me as a kid as the baseline for our immunity support system. So I think in some ways that's how COVID really sort of changed the lens I was looking through, because it was all alcohol before that, and it changed it to hey, we could do a natural energy drink that supports immunity. Um, and there were so many things during that time it was just a crazy time.
let's keep moving down the line. And that COVID was perfect for your story and for what's going on. So I want to get a handle on exactly what you do for your day job. I'm going to put you in front of 13-year-olds. It's career day, and one of the kids wants to know what you do for a living. How do you answer them?
Yeah, so today I call myself the Chief Energy Officer. I'm the CEO of Mocean Drink Works, and Mocean Drink Works is a company that my I founded with my son, um, and it's trying to be the adults in the room when it comes to energy. So we don't we for instance, the formulation was a whiteboard. We said, what functional benefits do we want to give the consumer, and what are the ingredients that are going to get us there, and what are reasonable amounts of those ingredients instead of overdosing with like a lot of, you don't need 1,000% of anything, in a single dose. And we see that a lot of the energy drinks tend to do stuff like that. So my current role is to sort of navigate a startup business. We've only been on the market since last Thanksgiving. November 23rd, I think, was the first day we went on sale on Amazon. Um, and so we're trying to navigate, the how to get a brand new product in front of people who've never heard of it and have, and we're far afield from a traditional energy drink. So that I think that's my main purpose today.
So what did you want to be when you were a kid? What was your dream job?
Oh gosh, I think well, when I was real little, the very first thing I wanted to be was a farmer,
Yeah.
and then I wanted to be a fisherman, um, and then I wanted to be an author. But what I found when I got to college was that I was really interested in how things worked, particularly from from a nature standpoint. So I became a biology major. And so that biology degree has helped me significantly. It helped me get my first job at Anheuser-Busch, which I actually, you know, started 2 days after graduating from college. And it's all I attributed all to the fact that I had a great undergraduate experience with my biology degree and research. And so, by the time I got to college, I got married my junior year. My son Christian, who is my partner in this business, was born my junior year in college. And so, fast forward, and all of a sudden I'm starting this business with this kid that, came a little earlier than we were expecting, but it's worked out great. So
Speaking of kids, take me back to your childhood. Where were you born and raised? What were the seeds that were planted that have made you this entrepreneur that has led to where you're at today?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic because I'm trying, I've been thinking a lot about it lately, right? I was born in the Philippines, and my father was he's Portuguese. My mother was Filipino, and what happened, I guess I should go back further because I think a lot of my entrepreneurial spirit's always been there, but you don't recognize it. You don't see it. You think you're an unsettled mind, right? You're unmoored, you're never happy, right? I feel like that kind of was the way I was going through life. But I think a lot of it was because in many ways, my childhood was a self-guided tour, right? We were from a lower middle class family. Father traveled all the time. My mother was sick a lot. Um, and so we were left to our own devices for a lot of it. And I think that in some ways, you know, um, there's some not so good things about that, but the good things that came out of it were that I was able to pursue things that interested me. There was no one telling me, oh, don't ride your bike off that cliff, right? It's not. I just went out and did whatever we wanted to do, and I think that in some ways feeds the entrepreneurial spirit. But I can tell you that my mother was a great inspiration to me. She was born during the Japanese occupation of the Philippines. So in 1943, she was born in a jungle because her family was hiding from the Japanese. They had come in and basically burned down the village and, you know, killed a lot of people. And so her family, my grandparents and some extended relatives went out to the jungle to hide. My grandmother was went into labor, so they made a decision that my grandfather and my grandmother should leave the rest of the tribe and go further into the jungle so that they don't attract the attention of the Japanese while she's giving birth, right? So 2 days after my mom's born, my grandfather goes back to find the rest of the family, and as it turns out, they had all been killed. So he goes back to the campsite where they left them, and the Japanese had found them, and they've all been killed. So my mother started out her life in this really chaotic and tragic way, and it continued to be tragic. And by the time she was 14, she was an orphan. Her father died when she was 5. Her mother was stabbed to death while my mother was with her.
Wow.
And so um, and my mother was stabbed as well. And so she almost didn't make it. She survived because she got the blood, and my grandmother didn't. And that was how it worked. But she was uneducated, and but the one thing that she learned growing up was Eastern medicine. And so when I was sick as a child, my mother, Karina, would whip up a cocktail of, vitamin C, echinacea, ginseng, elderberry, all of these things. And we would drink it and we get better. Anyway, but that's the interesting point is that all of those ingredients are what are the base formula for our Mocean Energy Drink.
Wow.
And we love it. I mean, it's such a great way to honor my mother. We love, we've got this approach that is not we're in a white space, right? We don't have any competitors doing what we're doing. And we're the highest scoring energy drink on the app Yucca. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were meeting with a major retailer a couple of weeks ago. And we said, we should probably figure out if we're on Yucca because we're brand new, right? Well, as it turns out, we scan our barcode and we found out that we're the highest scoring energy drink on the app. And
Wow.
that's an app that has 85 million users. And so, we feel, privileged to be able to bring this drink to the market, and that it's a family business, right? It's special, and so anyway.
What a wonderful full circle kind of way of celebrating your ancestry and something that's actually really good for the body. I mean, it makes perfect sense. So I'm curious, in the realm of entrepreneurship, who have you admired? Who have you looked up to? Who have you emulated that's helped, along with your mother and other heroes in your life, who's been that entrepreneurial spirit that you've looked up to?
Well, I think I'd be lying if I didn't say that I'm really inspired by Anthony von Mondel. He is the guy that started Mike's Hard Lemonade, started Mark Anthony Brands. He was the guy that pushed for White Claw to be produced when, you know, some folks thought it would be a distraction to Mike's. And, he really, um, what, what I saw with Anthony was he not only was he had great instincts as to what was gonna land and what was gonna stick, right? I mean, how many times can you get a $1 billion brand, right? And he's done it a couple times. And he so I just in seeing how he approached business and going after things aggressively and when to pull back on the reins, right? Because not everything works. There were brands that we thought were going to take off. We did a dozen different teas and none of them really ever stuck. You know, in fact, we actually had made the, the the Lionel Messi hydration drink, and that started a couple of years ago. They pulled the plug on that this year before the World Cup because it just wasn't selling, you know.
Wow.
And so, not knowing when to pull the plug and when to double down, I think is what I learned from watching Anthony do his thing. Um, and then of course, I'm because I'm a brewer, I you know, loved following like Ken Grossman from Sierra Nevada, right? He he was they just seem to always do the right thing, put the brand and the customer first and the flavor profile, and I think so. I think Ken Grossman is inspirational to me. Um, but I'd say those two in particular were the ones that, if I could model myself, that would be how I do it. I could never do them justice, but I'm going to try.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. What is the energy for you to do the work that you do as an entrepreneur? You have all of the
It takes some discipline, right? Because I retired last July from Mark Anthony, so I could start this business with my son. And so I get up in the morning now, and instead of having to run, catch a bus to go down to Boston, grab a plane to go across the country to visit two breweries and come, I don't have to do that anymore. But I have to get up and I have to do the NetSuite integration for my little company because we want to get our ERP system set up for when we start to get some bigger accounts. I've got to, I'm going back and forth with my lawyers about trademarks and things like that. And, so I think there's at first I didn't know how to deal with, I guess, the luxury of time. And of course, as we start to do more sales and as we start to get more busy, that luxury of time is shrinking and shrinking, right? I'm like, I have to get on a schedule now, or I don't get all my stuff done because I'm also out selling to small retailers in my area. I'm also doing tastings on the weekends and that sort of thing for consumers. And so in order to make sure that I keep all these, all those strings going at the right time, um, I have to get on a schedule. And so for me, I've never been a guy who slept late. So I try to be as productive as I can in the mornings, do my thing midday, the meetings, that sort of thing, and then try to work at night to keep it going. So
So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight and you ran into an 18-year-old version of you ready to go out into the world, and you walked into the room, there was a film projector, and you clicked play, and a highlight reel of your life came up, 60 seconds, all the decisions and everything that's landed you where you're at today, would that young version of you believe that your life turned out this way?
no, no. You know, well, I definitely jumped the tracks, right? I'm on the other side now. And I we growing up it was kind of every man for himself in my house, right? It was tough. Again, my dad, I think he got his college degree right before I got mine, right? So and my mom was very sick growing up. A lot of it had to do with the trauma that she had experienced early on. And so there was not, there just wasn't, you know, availability of people to emulate. And so, I had attached myself to families, other families and things like that. And it helped me along. And of course, my dad, did as best as he could. But like I said, he was traveling internationally as a technician, electronics technician. And so I think, at 18, I, well, you know, I played Olympic development soccer growing up, right? So up, probably from 14 to maybe 17 or 18. And, but I realized pretty early on that I was not good enough to play even Division One. You know, so, you start to, when you're young, you think I'm going to be a pro, right? I can do anything. And then you get punched in the face. Right? And then all of a sudden it's like, that's not going to happen. And so I had to think about all the stuff that I had never thought I had to worry about, like grades and, because my athletic ability was going to carry me. It it didn't quite work out that way. And of course I wasn't I because of that I was not the greatest student even in college. Uh, so I think my 18-year-old self would be saying, "Who are you? I don't recognize you."
Yeah.
So,
So in that highlight reel, what are you the happiest about? What are you the proudest of?
well, I think I'm most proud of, sort of my family, the way my wife and like I said, I, we were married. Um, I left graduation in a Ford Escort and left my wife and my 1 year old in New Hampshire. And I drove straight through to St. Louis so I could start Monday morning at the Anheuser-Busch Research Brewery. And then she joined me a month or so later with my son. And we basically were on our own. We had no network. And we moved several times over my career for opportunities. And again, no network, just no built-in babysitters, no, it was a tough go. And we have been able to stick it out. We're really tight knit family. My wife, my kids, they're my son's family. It's very tight knit. There's you know take away everything else and leave me that, and I'd still be happy.
So let's get to the hard the marrow in your bones here. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you in different capacities, but you're the driving force of what we see. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, I think who do I think I am? I think my self perception is that, well, I know that maybe am a I'm a guy that is very deep data oriented, right? So I want to get all the data before I make a decision. And that has been a hard thing to get over because sometimes you got to make decisions without the full data set. And I think that's what one of the things that I would say about me is that um, I am definitely a guy who wants to understand what all the puts and takes are for any situation, and then my wheels are always spinning as to how does that impact me or this business or this family. And so I think folks would consider me as, well, I've been told that I never smile, right? That I'm not that I people are afraid to approach me because I look like I'm grumpy all the time. Maybe I am, um, but I don't think that's the case. I think I'm a lot of times my wheels are spinning, and so I end up, I think people take it the wrong way, but I'm sure that that's how some folks are perceiving me. Yeah.
So if anybody wants to get their hands on your drink, they want to learn more about your company, reach out to you, any of the good business, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, right now, the best place is through Amazon. We are on Amazon with our four flavors. The product is called Mocean, and it's spelled Mocean, like M with ocean.
Yeah.
Um, but there are our four flavors there, where we've got a variety pack as well that you can buy through our website, which is www.drinkmotion.energy. And and then we're starting to get into some retail accounts, and we're talking to some big retailers right now for 2027, and we think that there's a good chance we'll be in several hundred stores. But yeah, so right now Amazon I would say is the best and quickest way to get.
Okay. I will put links to your website, Amazon. I'll make sure that it's easy for everybody. Tony, this has been absolutely wonderful. What a great story. Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out. Best of luck with rolling it out next year and beyond. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Joe.
You bet. Thank you.